Welcome to the DCC Museum.
This is Iconic Groove.
Ben, thank you for having us. I know it would have been better if we would have been in the same room, but due to 2020 and the cards that have dealt with us, I guess this is the best alternative to make this interview worth everybody's while. So thanks for having us. The interview, of course, is regarding the exciting release on your album Iconic Groove on digital compact cassette. Can you tell us a little bit about that album? I know it's a few years old, how it was created, and what was the thought process behind creating that album?
Iconic Groove was an idea that came up because I wanted to recreate not just the feeling and not just the sound of the music, but to see if I could capture the frame of mind of the 80s, of coming back home with your favorite album, taking it out of the sleeve for the first time, putting it on the turntable and lowering the needle into the groove. And that's an experience. That's not just a memory, but it's an experience. And if you could make music that puts you back into that same state of mind, then my mission would be accomplished. So I went about recording, kind of in an old school fashion, starting off with real instruments, starting off with a real bass player, guitar player, putting down some rudimentary chords, and then taking those parts and building those parts into the structure of a song. And that was kind of the process behind Iconic Groove. And I was very fortunate to have so many people help me and so many people cooperate with this project. So it ended up the way I wished it would end up.
One step before that, when I read on the insleeve of the vinyl album, the title says "Coffee with Armin van Buuren." What I found very interesting is like, okay, so you have coffee. It's been then roughly 20 years then since you did your first vinyl, so there is a gap. What did he say to you to make you convince or see the light? Okay, this is the path I had to follow. Is that something you're willing to share?
Yeah, this is something actually which occurred before starting on the album, and it was a visit. It was one of the monthly visits I do to the Netherlands for my DJ gigs. And I made an appointment with Armin to just have some coffee there. And whilst we were having some coffee, I mentioned that, it was such a shame that the planning came out in such a way that I could not attend Amsterdam Dance Event because it was a very, very busy month. And it basically was working up till the point where I needed to grab all my stuff and head out to the airport and fly. So there was no time for anything else, just for whatever was necessary, whatever deadline need to be met. I finished that, head off to the airport, and by the time I arrived in Holland, sitting at Armin's coffee table, I was like, yeah, it's such a shame I missed Amsterdam Dance Event. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, Amsterdam Dance Event being last week and me being in Holland this week. And I totally got the schedule off. And he said, well, here's news for you. The Amsterdam Dance Event is this week. And then I was like, okay, so I messed up the schedule, but I also can't go to the Amsterdam Dance Event now because it's already in action. It's already going on. So I can't attend anymore. And Armin just picked up the phone, made a phone call. And an hour and a half later, I was at the Amsterdam Dance Event. And not only at the Amsterdam Dance Event, I had an all areas pass, and I was in one of the panels, which was about doing mix shows, which get broadcasted internationally. So Armin, by just making this phone call, opened up, the possibility to attend Amsterdam Dance Event after all. a side effect of this was I didn't have anything planned. I didn't have any schedules. I didn't have any appointments at Amsterdam Dance Event. So I just went along with Armin. Wherever he had an appointment, when he had an interview, I just go along and wait until the interview was finished. And it was nice for Armin as well because we are friends. So, we can talk for weeks, and music doesn't even have to be a topic. So that kind of illustrates what kind of friends we are. We can talk about anything and everything for hours at end. So that was also nice for Armin because he had someone tagging along that week, to have a normal conversation with. Tagging along with him, I met so many people. Where, those were my heroes. And Armin, courteous as he always is, introduced me to everybody. And people were like, Ben Liebrand, I'm so glad I finally got to meet you. And, I know your name, but I didn't know what you looked like. And it's such a, it's such a nice occasion that we finally meet. And I was like, whoa, not only I didn't realize that these people knew me, but I didn't even come close to realizing that I was of influence to these people. From the Netherlands, most of the people know me, but internationally, so many DJs and so many producers were like, Ben Liebrand, finally, I get to meet you. And I'm like, I still have the attention. I still have people tracking what I do, still have people following my mixes, and not only in the Netherlands, but internationally. And that's actually the moment where I decided, okay, now it makes sense to do this album because I know it will have people with their ears pointed and I will have an audience for it. So that was actually that, having a coffee at Armin that day, that Tuesday, that was the spark that sparked the whole idea to do the album.
Okay, so it wasn't like I imagined that he said, okay, marketing wise, it would be a good idea to release your own music. It was just that day altogether that made you decide to do it.
That day and that week and all the people I met through that week, and from just being in the Netherlands to do DJ gigs to suddenly being in the panels at Amsterdam Dance Event, being included in interviews for Dutch television. And also there, people that are, if it comes to generations in DJs, that are like, two generations distance from me, but were influenced either by myself or were influenced by the people that were influenced by myself. So Armin, for example, is someone who got into music, got into DJing because of the mixes he heard that I was doing. And then, in turn, Armin also inspired a whole generation of DJs, well, not DJs, a whole generation of guys and girls to become DJs themselves as well. So it kind of became clear that what kind of impact I had on so many people, way beyond what I was aware of, and way beyond the borders of the Netherlands.
So when I believe on the vinyl, there are 17 tracks and there might be more on the CD. I don't have that version. And then we had to, cut that back to 10 plus a vocoder intro on the DCC. When you talk about digital CD or vinyl, how did you end up with 17 tracks? What is the thought process behind that? Did you have more songs originally?
I had one more, but that just didn't pan out. I mean, when working on a song, you kind of work to the point where you feel that everything falls into place, that everything makes sense, and that your idea you had comes across. And that worked with a lot of songs, but not all of them. So there are maybe one and a half, another idea that just didn't work out, that just didn't come to fruition. And but that doesn't matter, because also in working with this album and previous albums, you have to be very strict where you put the bar. Try to put the bar as high as possible. And also, it could very well be that, a track might have a day and a half working on a bass line, and you'd have people come in and you have musicians come in and you have horn sections recorded, and then finally you're working on the track and you're like, seemed like a nice idea, but in the end result, it just doesn't work. And then you have to have the courage to take that stuff out. It could be 6 hours of recording horns where you then decide like, no, it doesn't work. So I'll just take them out. I'm not going to use them. And you have to have that discipline and that courage to do that. And same goes for a track. So, you could be working on a track for a week and a half and then decide like, no, this is not leading me to where I hoped it would lead me. So I'll just leave it out. And that's also happened to the album. And whilst working on the album, I myself obviously are a great fan of the extended versions, the 12-inch versions. So the CD contains all these full-length, say 12-inch versions of tracks, which pretty quickly filled up the capacity of the first CD. The runtime for a CD is about 87 minutes. And so I was quickly passing that maximum capacity. So then was the idea, okay, so it's going to be a double CD. And then obviously you can't make a double CD where, the first CD is filled and the second CD only has 2 or 3 tracks. So then I was like, hey, that enables me also to do this. And now I have room to do that. And for example, one of the tracks on the CD is To the Venue, which is a 15-minute track. And, if you just put out one CD, that would take up so much time that a track like that could not be included. Now, 2 CDs, I have all the space I need, and I just proceeded with whatever felt right.
How hard is it to make that transition? You have many nicknames, Master Mixer, Jedi Master, to go from mixing something that you hear that somebody else has created and then improve on it, like you did with so many tracks. The list is almost endless on your website. To make that transition to create something totally new that you haven't even heard before, that has to come in your mind. Like you were describing the process, sitting in the car and thinking about on, and then it just came. How different is that? Is that a totally different ball game?
No, it is. One of the things that one of the things that is at the foundation of this all is that I myself I need something to begin with. If you would compare it with making custom cars, I would need the front and end bumper. I would need something. If you compare it to making clothing, I would at least need to have a button on the sleeve. I would need to have something. That something would then inspire or lead me to the next step in the design. And it could very well be that, when I finish my custom car, it won't even have those initial bumpers on there. And if I finish my shirt, it won't even have that first button I started with. But I need a spark. I need something. When I'm working on somebody else's track, obviously that will be the starting point. But with Iconic Groove, I had the following idea. I know a great bass player, Marcel Schimschheimer, who played all the bass parts on my album. And I know a great guitar player, Jochem Fluitsma, who did all the guitar parts. And we just went into the studio and I explained them, I have an idea for an album. It's called Iconic Groove. And Iconic Groove, it's obviously, as a bass player, you will pick up your instrument and the first thing you'll play is the bass line from Another One Bites the Dust, or it would be the bass line from Chic, Good Times, and those are iconic bass lines. So my idea was I would like to make an album called Iconic Groove, where we try to make more of these iconic bass lines, iconic guitar riffs, and turn them into iconic grooves. So that was basically what I explained, and then it was like, let's do the first track, and we just picked a key, song key, and asked Marcel to just come up with something, and he would play a riff, and that would be like the first button on your sleeve. That would be the first thing to start from, and then it was, that's right, that's cool, but I'd like to have a different ending to it. And the last chord of these 4 chords needs to be a little bit more jazzy, needs to be a little bit more, bring a little bit more tension in there, and explaining back and forth like, this is yes, that's it, yes. Last note, not the one on the upbeat, but leave that one out and see how it sounds then. Yes, that's it. This is the one. So, and then Marcel would play that bass line, and then Jochem would add the guitar parts to it. And Marcel would sit back and relax in between shots, and he would just slap away at something, say, "Oh, stop it right there. What you're doing right now, I want that too." So then we recorded those parts as well. And we kind of came up to this way of working where there is the groove for the track, and then there would be an alternate groove to that. So the main part would be the A part, and then we would make a B part, like a variation on that, or going into a different key, or going into a different rhythm, or going into whatever. So that would be the variation. And the A part would be the majority of the song, and the B part could be either a middle 8, or it could turn out to be a bridge going into the chorus. And I would just take those elements back to my own studio, start playing around with them, and see how stuff would fall into place. And that is how I started with Iconic Groove. And you mentioned another idea, the track On and On. That idea came whilst driving back from Edmonton. Our son Sasha, he's a bass guitar and double bass player in Edmonton. We visited him, and I drove back, and my daughter was with me in the car, and I said, I have this idea about basically about a synthesizer being self-aware and talking about how he works and what he enjoys, and just like a robot, like a droid, suddenly being aware of loving music, but also being aware of how the music is created. And whilst driving from Edmonton back to Calgary, she just opened the note thing on her phone, and I just gave her sentence after sentence, and that turned into the track On and On. So it comes from different directions. The basic idea for Iconic Groove being that all the tracks on Iconic Groove should be connected to being a DJ, being a performer, getting to the venue. For example, being a performer, the track "Can You Hear Me," which is about I'm here doing my best to perform. I'm hoping it comes across to the audience. It's always scary to go on stage, and that's what "Can You Hear Me" is about. And then Dancer, so obviously Dancer, Boogie, all these tracks way up till To the Venue, which is the rush you are in to get to the venue in time, to get to your gig in time. And obviously it starts off with all relaxed, but then as time goes by, it gets more hectic because you're getting closer to the time that you're supposed to be there, and it kind of ends in your mind with driving onto the parking lot and looking at your watch, made it, got there in time. All the way to Sunrise, which is a track which is very important as well as a DJ and a performer, because especially in summertime, you'll head back home, and by the time you head back home, sun is already coming up. And Closing Time, also one of those tracks which is, we had the whole we had the whole evening, we had the whole experience, we had the whole event, and closing time is almost like the whole venue, like the whole club. Everything is silent, everything is slowing down, and it's almost like the whole building has a sigh of relief and had a great evening again. And this is closing time and time to rest.
You and I went to the same school. We're children of the '60s. We went to a technical college, MTS, they call it in the Netherlands. The phrase as a capacitor, I could not resist. Is that yours, or did you hear that from?
Yes. And you know, and it's stuff like that. It's well, actually, it's a dad joke. It's a dad joke in a song, and but it works and it's correct. You know, as a capacitor, you simply can't resist. And yeah, that's one of the lines that came up there, and it works so well in the rest of the text that I'm a nerd, and I'm proud to be a nerd, and I love music as much as I love the technical aspect and stuff. You know, if you have all these aspects and are able to bring them together like that in a song, and even put like a nerd's a dad nerd dad joke in there. Yeah. So yeah, that's mine.
It belongs to there. Yeah, it's beautiful. So, as mentioning, being a child from the '60s, you were very aware of what was going on in the transition age of the early '90s when digital compact cassette came out. Do you remember hearing it for the very first time? When they tried to transition cassette, which was previously your then go medium in the early '80s when you were still slicing tape. Do you remember DCC coming out and your thoughts about it then?
Well, my experience with digital goes back further because way back in you'd have to look it up, 1983, 1984, it was already possible to edit digital on U-matic tape with the Sony system. Then Sony came out with a system where instead of using the U-matic tape, they introduced the Sony F1 system, which was a combination of Sony Betamax, the regular Betamax video recorder, and the Sony F1 analog digital analog converter, which funnily enough made a more reliable, a more comfortable or more easy to use system than the big system they had with the U-matic. I mean, it was so much easier and it was so much almost safer to record it on the Sony F1 because it just simply always worked. So up till then, I was doing all my mixes on tape, but the Sony F1 enabled me to take it digital, get rid of the tape noise, and everything I would build from there on would be first generation. So only up to the point where I would edit the final tape. That's when whatever I was doing went from digital to analog. And there are a lot of people nowadays that have these almost religious, magical feelings about analog tape. That's what it is. It's just a religion. It's a belief, but it's not fact. And an analog tape might, we're getting a little bit technical here, but an analog tape might indeed record to 22 kilohertz or whatever, but it would be 20 kilohertz at minus 10 or minus 12 dB, or, it might indeed record 24 kilohertz, but not at any usable amplitude. And if you're not a philosopher about this thing, but you actually have to work with the medium, then it turns out that working digital was so much better quality-wise than trying to keep it analog. Also because, if I play these F1 tapes back now and these are tapes that were recorded in 1983, they play back flawless. There is no degradation. It is exactly what it was back then, which you can't achieve with analog tape. So this is a little bit about the transition from digital to analog and being realistic about the advantages of the one, opposed to the disadvantages of the other. And so I've been working with digital since 1983. I'd like to also address now at this point that people have this notion about digital sounding cold, which is the same notion as spinach making you Popeye. It's a general, I don't know, it's a myth. It really is a myth. Because when in the early days people had the possibility to record digital, the thing they hated up to that point was the noise. So what happened is you have a whole era of digital recordings where people were so much focused on getting rid of the noise, getting rid of the background sounds, getting rid of everything that, interfered with what they felt the music should be. And that basically ended up in people making productions which were just too clean, too cleaned up, too polished, too noise-free, too, all artifacts, all playing artifacts were gone because they were aiming for that, sound of we are finally getting rid of the noise. So it's not due to the digital that the first digital recordings sounded digital. It was to the people using the format. And if you translate that back to the Beatles were mono. At some point, stereo became available, and like digital, people had no clue how to work with stereo. So you ended up with all the drums on the left channel and the whole band on the right channel, which is crazy. It was just a way that people started to use a new format and didn't actually know how to use the format and started to using it in a crazy way. By, for example, with the Beatles going to these extreme mixes with drummer being left, rest of the band being right, bass player being left, crazy. Same thing happened with digital when it came along. People just went bananas, just went crazy of getting rid of that noise, which resulted in quite a number of digital records which just sounded void of all human input and thereby sounded void, sounded cold. Not a problem caused by the fact that it's digital, but caused by the people not knowing how to use the new medium. But that thing that, digital sounds cold is just as stupid as spinach makes you just as strong as Popeye. It's just a common, it's a myth. So digital. When I started using a digital, that was with the Sony F1. And at a certain point, the DCC came along, and you know way better than me exactly in what year that was.
92.
92. So by 92, already that digital audio tape had made its entrance in my production environment. And by that time, it was already possible to edit digitally with the Akai DD1000, which is an optical disc recorder, to make your edits fully digital. And that meant that I could record my sessions, make the edits digital. And by that time, the whole Betamax format was already in kind of in decline. But that tape was the new medium. So by 1991, 92, I already had several DAT machines, and DAT machines were the format I mastered and recorded onto. But I know, for example, back then the DAT machines were very expensive, and I was fortunate enough that I could afford them, and not only one, but I had two, so I could make identical master copies, because also the professional DAT machines allowed you to make one-on-one copies from one machine to the other. So that meant that if my production was ready and it needed to be sent to England and it needed to be sent to Germany, they would both get quality-wise the exact same master. Being so expensive, the DAT machines meant that not everybody could or would afford them. And I know that, for example, Armin van Buuren, the guy who kicked off my whole Iconic Groove album, he used DCC to record all his productions and all his masters. So that was his digital format to go to. I had very close relations to Philips back in the time, because I was also doing. I was actually making their demonstration streets for the RAI, which is an annual. Was it an annual thing in the Netherlands? I'm not sure.
Yes.
The RAI, which is like a hi-fi nerd heaven for everybody, where new equipment was introduced, and I used to do the demo, like I would make the demos for people to walk through to listen to all the Philips equipment. So that's where my connection from Philips came from, and I had the DCC, so I could use the DCC. But the thing back then was I had the DCC in my studio, whilst that was already the format that was used professionally since 1990. And I didn't have a DCC player in the car, so that meant that I could record stuff on the DCC in my studio and play it back on the DCC in my studio. But at that time, it didn't have a expanded use for myself, because I couldn't even play it in the car. Funny side note is that during one of these talks I had with Philips about the new RAI exhibition and the new demo we would make, they gave me a DAT player, a Philips DAT player for the car. So Philips had made a DAT player for in your car, and they gave it to me because at that point, by the time it was ready, it would never be marketed by Philips, because Philips had the DCC coming, and it wouldn't make sense for Philips to put a DCC on the market and at the same time put a DAT player for the car on the market. So so I had DCC, but as I said, unfortunately not in a way where I could put proper use to it. One of the things also why I couldn't make proper use to it is because you can't imagine it as somebody who just buys music and listens to music and has this hi-fi system. But music for me back then and even now is a 7-day per week job, where every day is filled with making music, and the only time I have to listen to the music is in the car, is when I'm traveling, and is when I have my music with me. And back then, unfortunately, it was not on, I didn't have a DCC player in my car.
Okay, so at one point you told me that your player broke, and you borrowed then Armin's DCC player. Why was that? You said you needed it for something specific. I believe it was analog tape, or
I had the DCC to transfer some recordings I had on DCC, but also, and correct me if I'm wrong, I had the feeling that DCC, also if you feed it a normal compact cassette, like an analog compact cassette, it does a great job of finding the proper azimuth. So it has a great job of finding the perfect alignment. And I know back then I had cassettes that came from different cassette decks, analog cassettes, and they all played perfectly on the DCC. So I don't know if DCC actually has an active azimuth control on there, if it actually actively aligns the head or if it performs some other trick. But the DCC also played analog cassettes flawlessly, regardless where they came from. So that was also something I used the DCC player for.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear because it does not have the azimuth correction, and most people don't use it for analog because the analog tapes shed more than digital and they clog up the head. So after you play an analog tape, your chances of not being able correctly a digital tape, a DCC tape, right now is about 50%. So it's interesting that you had a totally different experience. Yeah. The idea of Philips behind it was great, but many perceive the analog part as being a little bit cumbersome. So it's interesting that you used it. You borrowed Armin's deck. Do you know if he still has it?
It got back to him, yes, because in 2010, when we left for Canada, on one of the visits for a nice cup of coffee with Armin, I brought the deck with me, so I know it is at Armin. So if he hasn't tossed it out, he'll still have it, and I'll for sure let him know about this release.
Yeah, he would be able to listen to it on his what I think is a DCC 900. Back then, that was the first go-to machine, and those are also known to have problems with when the capacitors fail. Capacitors could not resist. One channel would go, or both channels would go. We're moving a little bit forward. I mean, we have this interesting connection where we met 3 years ago professionally. You came and spin at my 50th birthday party. I visited one of your parties in Canada that you host in Calgary. These very interesting disco themed parties. But at one point in 2019, we had this click where I dared to ask you, like, would it be possible to release Ben Liebrand music on DCC? And I knew leading up to that moment that you can only ask this question once. Otherwise you become a nag, or, it's like that one-on-one. And the answer was interesting because your answer was, the thought has crossed my mind. Can you lead me up? I mean, obviously, so I didn't surprise you with the question. When the thought had crossed your mind, when did you start thinking about the possibility, or did you make that decision instantly that in Heerlen at the festival where I asked you?
Actually, I made the decision on the spot. In my enthusiasm, foolishly also thinking like, this is going to take me 2 or 3 days. So I like the idea, and I like the traditional formats and the nostalgic formats, and was also obviously also thrilled by your enthusiasm about doing the project. So I was like, let's do this and see if we can get this whole thing together. And the idea was from the beginning that if we do this release, it should be a little bit more than just put a couple of tracks on there from the recordings that already exist. So the idea came to make several special mixes, to do a selection of the tracks, and later on the idea came that the DCC fans should have input in which tracks they should be. And once we were at that point, obviously the artwork, which I did also for my own album, we would have to resize and reformat the artwork to fit the DCC format, which is again exciting, and which again took way longer than expected. And so we making the decision was right there on the spot, and I considered it doable, which turned out that it was. And obviously we also needed the cooperation of the record company to do that, because after all, the album was licensed to Sony Music. So we took that hurdle as well. And yeah, now we are at a DCC version of Iconic Groove.
So as we've worked for over a year now on the graphics, the artwork, the audio, including the video, I have known you as a person who is a perfectionist and ergo also does not like to relinquish control that easy.
Not that easy.
But you-
Not that easy.
Well,
not at all.
What point taken. Leading up to the point, it was actually your idea, not my idea, to say, can you ask DCC fans what they would like to hear on the album? So I created a group based on your Facebook of your top fans who I know have a DCC player. Otherwise, that wouldn't be fair. You could ask Ben Liebrand fans altogether. That would be fair. But there is, of course, the fair assumption that not everybody has a DCC player. So for you to be doing that and then actually following through with that, wasn't that hard? If you might felt that some tracks would not make your pick necessarily?
You know, it is sometimes it's difficult because, you know, you make certain tracks are your personal favorites, and certain tracks are very approachable to everybody, and not necessarily are the tracks that are your personal favorites the personal favorites of your audience. But it's something that I do think I see myself as being realistic about entering into projects and being realistic about what the expectations are, and it's a balance between really wanting to do what you love yourself and being realistic about you do need your audience. I mean, I can be here mucking about all day, but if the people if the audience doesn't like what I'm doing, it's not going to resonate and it's not going to work. So it's a balance between those two, but you have to be realistic. And if the fans would like a particular track where I by now would think like, I like the idea at the time, but now I would prefer another track or prioritize another track. Still, if that's the track that people like, and you have to be realistic about it. You have to, and as much as I like to keep everything in control, and that has to do with, if I hear something, if I see something, stuff that doesn't align, stuff that doesn't fall into place, it just pops up at me immediately. So I have it very seldom that that I have a project and I can hand off the project and somebody else can do their part and I'll be satisfied straight away with what they do. One exception is, for example, Peter Cole. Peter Cole is the guy who did the video versions to my grand mixes, and the video versions to my grand mixes are done in such a way where I feel like, yeah, I would have done it the same. And then the end titles come and I'm again like, yeah, I would have done it the same. So there are very few people that would, I don't know, lay the bar so ridiculously high that when they give their work back to me, I'm like, yeah, that's the way I would have done it. And which obviously makes it difficult to let go of any part of the production. But with the choice of the tracks, I'm just realistic, and this has to please people. People will have to enjoy this release. And how great is it if your personal favorite is on there?
That leads immediately, you're introducing and leading up to the next question. How did you realistically like working with our team? I mean, we consider ourselves nerds, so but also try to be perfectionists. How did you enjoy the team? With Jacques Goudsmit and Jeremy and myself. It was relatively a small team, but we always had to be and try to be up to par with your standards, which is something we had never done before, working directly with an artist on releasing a DCC album.
I've come at an age where I feel that I can be and should be very frank about what makes me tick. And we had some discussions, none of them problematic, but and at a certain point I realized that I should explain a little bit more how I tick, so that you understand, like, yes, that's why he does that, and that's why he's not, that's why he's picking on this little thing, and making a fuss about that. And yeah, so maybe this project also helped me to make it clear to people I'm working with that I have this way how my brain clicks, how my brain ticks, and it's probably easier for all of us if I explain that beforehand, so that if I come back with you in some criticizing way on any aspect of this, you'll understand where it's coming from, and that it's not it is not criticizing a person, but it is trying to elevate the whole project. And that is something which is very important, and it's also something which I've learned from a book written by a guy at Pixar. He wrote a book about running a company, and where you should be able to come together and discuss stuff and be able to address issues in such a way, and with the knowledge that you're addressing the issue and not a person. And if you can put yourself past that, which also counts for myself, then you can get great results, because everybody feels free to give their opinion, to give their insight, which will then be either countered by a rationale, why this particular thing was done, or not a compromise, but a collaboration to raise the final product even higher. And I think I got better with that over the years. Whilst in the beginning, I just felt like, no, I feel like I have to do it this way, and you can keep talking to me, but whatever you're saying is just noise, which I'll cancel out, and I'll just do it the way I want to do it myself. It's how I work, unfortunately, or perhaps even fortunately, because it also caused an amount of stubbornness I apparently needed to survive in this business and to make a mark.
Were you, in the end, with the DCC and the media box, were you happy with the result?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And we even had, from the final, say, the final prototype to the final version, there were another two small revisions, and I was at the point like, should I remark on this? Should I not remark on this? And I did, and the final product became better for it. So I'm happy I did, and the final product is 100% up there, top notch.
Glad to hear that. When you were mixing the 6 different tracks, you mentioned earlier in a conversation we had that it got you sort of back into thinking about doing more with Iconic Groove for the future versions with a different vibe. What can we expect of Iconic Groove in the next few years regarding the versions that are in your head now?
Well, as I said, I did the album back then just to capture that frame of mind. That was the only thing I had, again, in my stubborn way. I wanted to lay that egg, so to speak. And now, sometime down the line, I am ready to turn it into an omelette. And my experience over the last 2 years, also doing weekly house shows, got me up to speed with what's going on in that scene, which resulted in #1 chart successes with recent remixes with Johnny Guitar Watson, for example. And so that also meant that I have now the framework in place to be able to do funky disco house remixes of my own material, because I have the framework in place with all the right sounds. I have the framework in place with regards to releasing it, getting it on the portals, which I didn't have back in 2015. And learned a lot over the last couple of years, which is my job, I am now able to take my own tracks and regard them very objectively and see what they need to make them work in the market of, in this case, 2021 for next year. And that's something I'm certainly going to do. And I have an excellent relationship with Sony, and it looks like that Sony is going to give me the freedom to do whatever I feel that is necessary to do for this project, which is very exciting.
So we've showed you a couple of DCCs. We've given you the Salt and Pepper, which you influenced quite a few songs, and you're even mentioned on that digital compact cassette. Also, a couple of years ago, the very first time you actually saw a DCC, it had the artwork on the greatest synthesizer hits. And you told us that that might have been one of the first artworks that you did as a commercial project for an album. Can you remember that?
Yeah, it was Synthesizer Greatest, and it was actually the very first artwork I did for a commercial project. And I remember how I did it, and looking back to it, it was, I got to the result, but it was actually such a clumsy way I got to where it was, because it included it included whales captured from video, 3D artwork, which was actually 2D made in Illustrator. And only after this first project, I got into the details of what it takes, what kind of resolution you need, how many, 300 dpi for print work, color separation, CMYK. So I learned a lot from that first one, but the one you showed me is actually the very first piece of artwork I did for a commercial release. And that led me onto a whole path and led me into 3D and high resolution artwork for projects and video and computer graphics, animation, and all that kind of stuff, which is, again, it's one of my hobbies besides music. And I just hope that my enthusiasm for that hobby as well comes across in a product which is then a visual, which pops, which does what it needs to do, and which appeals to people.
So when you get in your car, what is your, if you want to feel good, what is your go-to type of music?
It's probably the thing I've been working on that week. And I put a lot of attention in doing the weekly mini mixes for Dutch radio, which are like a 5-minute espresso strength remix, mega mix, multi-mix, multi-track remix, or multi-track mashup of a lot of different elements which come together in such a way that 1 + 1 is more than 2. That's what I aim for. I'll be listening to those. If I have some distance to travel, then I'll have episodes of In the House with me as well to keep up the energy. If I'm flying, I always have the albums of Pink Floyd. Probably people wouldn't expect that, but I always, on every phone I've ever had, I have the albums Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Echoes. I have those 4 albums on my phone just to enjoy, the exquisite musical content, the exquisite performance, just the perfection of those albums. And if the trips are even longer, I revert to audiobooks. So that's also something I picked up way back in the early 90s when I would have those drives back home from the venue, 6 o'clock in the morning, still 120 miles to drive. And I would just put on audiobooks. And the audiobooks were a great benchmark in such a way that if I couldn't follow the story, if there was a moment like, wait, what? That would be the moment to find a parking spot and take a nap for 15 minutes, because otherwise it would be kissing the guardrails with your car, which you better not do at the speeds in Germany on the Autobahn.
Career over 4 decades, started with tapes. You must have schlepped quite a few vinyls in your years. I mean, now you have the perfection of working in Ableton and doing so much more. Do you sometimes miss the nostalgic of spinning the old way, the way you used to with vinyl?
No, no. I really love the nostalgic aspect of vinyl, but I've always been someone who goes along with the latest technology, and if the latest technology is a better way of working for what I need to do, I'm very objective about it and make my decision to go along with the next technology. And I still have my SL1200 turntables. They turn 40 years next January. They still run flawlessly, both of them. But working digital gives me so many more possibilities. And I'm very objective about it. I mean, the fact that you're playing from vinyl does not make your set better. The choice of music and what you do with the music determines what your set is. I mean, it would be as foolish that a book would be better if it would be written on a traditional typewriter. That's not the case. I mean, the typewriter is the tool, and people would agree, everybody would agree with me that a book doesn't become a better book just because it isn't written in a word processor, but because it would have been written on a traditional typewriter with paper. And that analogy also translates to vinyl. Vinyl it's a beautiful medium. It's a very nostalgic medium, and the sense, the feeling was one of the triggers for me to do Iconic Groove. But on the technical side, you should be objective, and you should, there is facts and there is fiction, and I go for facts. I'm a very realistic guy. I go for what works, and if digital works better for me, then digital works better for me, and I can't be bothered by people that are still in love with typewriters. I'd love to have a typewriter, by the way. I'd love to have one of those old-fashioned typewriters because I appreciate the nostalgia, and I would probably put it here in my studio in the rack with all the other stuff I'm collecting. But that's where it belongs then, and the work needs to be done on the tools of today.
So especially your 12 inches, the maxi singles as we called them back in Europe, what happened to that huge collection?
I still have all the 12 inches which have a story for myself, which I know where I bought them, which I know where I played them first. All of them that have a story for myself, I have them. So I have 3 crates. All of them are sorted in BPM. So if I open them now and I put them on the turntables, I can do a set. I still have those. And all the other 12 inches where I was like, I can't even remember what this was. I just got rid of them. So I got rid of about 5,500 vinyls before we left for Canada. And it were all titles which I had received as promotional copies, and where I was like, I'm not even sure what this is anymore. So let's just get rid of it.
You're a man of many trades: photography, artwork, animation, video, and audio. I previously had asked you what would be your favorite, and the answer I would expect would have been audio, but you didn't make any difference. You said you liked all of them equally. Is that a way of keeping you sane, of doing 7 days a week, of juggling the work?
It's what keeps it interesting. If you're doing one thing all days of the week, then it might get boring. And the fact that I am kind of bouncing back and forth between doing audio projects and visual projects, that's what keeps it interesting. And also introducing new software and finding new possibilities. And there is stuff happening now which 5 years ago would have been science fiction, which goes for what you can do with audio as well as what you can do with video. I mean, for video, there is software now based on artificial intelligence which can upscale material in such a way to higher resolutions, which, if you'd seen it 5 years ago in NCIS, one of those series, you know the shot. They have this little blurry car in a picture, and then the guy sits behind the computer and suddenly they can read the number plate. It's happening now. That stuff is happening now. And if you see what this software can do for audio and what it can do for video, I mean, talking about two different pieces of software, obviously. But if I would have heard this, if I would have been told about this 5 years ago, I would have said, yeah, right. Fairy tales. But it is here now. And again, that opens up new possibilities. And again, I will go with these new possibilities if I feel that this works better for me than what I've been using before. So yes, I think you should stay objective and you should keep up. And meanwhile, enjoy the nostalgia where it shines best.
So when going through your discography, I noticed that you are one of the few artists that actually built a bridge by releasing not only on minidisc, although it was only one song by Tony Scott that ended up on a compilation album, but not very few artists have released on minidisc and digital compact cassette because that was a thing because Philips and Sony couldn't see eye to eye. Were you aware that you also at some point released on minidisc?
No, didn't even know. No. And here's the thing. That also has to do with over all these years, I have not been in the position that I'm an observer of what I'm doing. I'm just doing, and I'm just glad that I'm getting everything ready, and then the project is ready and it gets out the door, and hopefully it's again successful. But I'm not a historian, because if I would want to be an historian, I don't have the time. So I don't have the time to keep track of all the details, and I didn't even know that there was a DCC of Salt and Pepper. And I can tell you something else. When I got my gold cassette award for 2 of the Salt and Pepper tracks, and that was a compact cassette award, I didn't even know at the time that cassettes were such a big thing in the United States, that pre-recorded cassettes were a thing. Being in Europe, where by that time nobody was using cassettes anymore because the CD was so widely accepted. Looking back, I can detect all these things, but at the time I didn't even have time to look into it, to be aware of it, and to come across it. Just too busy.
You aren't aware of the fact that there is a website only describing whatever you did on what medium?
No.
Oh, okay. I will send that to you. It's super interesting, and I found it just by typing in Ben Liebrand minidisc, Ben Liebrand digital compact cassette. Then you'll find Salt and Pepper. Then you'll find the Sony compilation tape where Tony Scott and you released an album, but also maybe hundreds, if not 1,000 different cassettes on compilation tapes that you end up, but somebody or a group of people have taken the time to build that historic website. I found it very interesting. I'll share that with you because you don't have to do that work. Somebody has already done it. It's called like Ben Liebrand discography.nl or something. It's very obvious.
I'll have a look.
This must be the longest stretch you've ever had without being outside in the field. How bad do you miss it?
I really miss my DJ gigs, and I really miss sharing, obviously, also the new productions I've been doing, and to see what they're doing on the dance floor. But we're just taking it easy now. I'm not taking it easy mentally. I mean, so we're very busy with all the projects I'm doing. But we realize that this is a crazy time we're in now, and nobody can tell in advance what is really making sense and what is not. So I'm just being relaxed about it, and hopefully, I can fly again soon and make the dance floor move.
I've seen you perform for 20,000 people. I've seen you perform for 200 people. I don't see the difference in enthusiasm and the way you interact with the audience. How do you do that?
It's not even a thing I have to do. That's one of the things that that's Ben Liebrand. That's how I work, and I don't need seeing the dance floor react. That is important. I could not imagine that I can only play DJ sets and there is no audience. I need an audience. I need to see the feedback. I need to see the joy that it brings. That I have the click to the dance floor. So that's important, but it doesn't make a difference if it's as you say, if it's 20,000 people or if it's 200 people. If I see that the response is there, then yeah, that's all I need. Really, honestly, that's all I need.
If you look back over the last 4 decades, what is your personal top three, excluding that I know you're going to say my wife and 3 kids are going to be the top 3. That is what every honorable father and family member would do. You're the guy who makes the pancakes at Sunday morning to your family. But on the professional side, what are your top 3 things that you have done that you're really proud of, that you would like to mention, if it's possible?
I very much like how way back In the Air Tonight came out for Phil Collins. Especially considering that it was an idea I had at a little before 10 in the morning, and the thing was ready at 6 p.m. No, 8 p.m. In the afternoon. At which point I had to drive to the radio station and play it at the radio station. And that exact tape, the tape I made at a couple of minutes before 8 o'clock, just before driving away, that is the exact tape that got used for the release on Virgin. So it was an idea in the morning, and it turned out great. And I didn't change one single bit to the master before it got released on Virgin, and it became a top 4 hit for Phil Collins, which is fantastic. That is one. And the other thing is actually a production which at this moment is kind of on hold to see if we can still get it released, but it is a remix for the Pet Shop Boys of West End Girls, and it turned so fine and turned out so great. And at the same time, we unknowingly kind of stumbled into a old disagreement between the Pet Shop Boys and the original producer of this track, something which we were not part of, but something which unfortunately has landed on our plates now. So we'll see if we can get that figured out, because it really turned out great, and I'd really love to share it with the world. I mean, it is out there. The cat is out of the bag, because the track has been on sale for a full day on TrackSource. So the copies are out there, but we'll see if we can make it work.
So the best might still be yet to come. What is in the bag for the next year? Anything exciting that you are already able to share?
Well, the thing is, I try to avoid all the stuff that is not exciting. So I always try to do wherever I feel that I can make a contribution to, and make it accessible to a new audience. And currently working on a production for SOS Band. I have a great connection to the original band members of SOS Band, and so I'm looking very forward to finishing that. And it'll just keep going on. And for example, one of the nice things that is planned for 2021 is I got quite a reputation back in the early 80s with doing the high fashion mix albums. I did 3, somebody else did a 4th, and now for the guy who bought that record company, I'm going to do a 5th in 2021, and it's going to be on vinyl. So it's going to be, it'll check all the boxes. It'll check all the nostalgia boxes when it comes to music. It'll check all the nostalgia boxes when it comes to also being available on vinyl. And so we'll see what happens, and also we'll see what will happen to the DCC release of Iconic Groove.
Absolutely. Well, we come to the end. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your passion. Our team has learned a lot. It is our best work, but that was only possible because we were led by you as the team leader. That was not how it was designed to be. We have a team in place, but you became the leader of the team, of the artwork,
Sorry.
guidance, and showed us the direction. And we thank you for that, and we're pretty sure it's going to be a huge success. So thanks again for allowing us to collaborate with you on that great album.
It was a great experience for me as well. Really, it was. And success to this release.
Thank you, Ben. All right.
This is Iconic Groove.